Nick, it's the time of the year when lifestyle blocks are really facing a problem,
Yeah.
nutritional wise.
Yes. So I wish I could say otherwise, but we still, year on year, have issues with underweight stock at the end of the winter period. And it's an important time now to plan that, especially for lifestyle block farmers or lifestylers. The limitation on carrying stock rests through the winter period, particularly on these small acreages, because we can virtually say that our growth is going to be zero through the winter period, unirrigated and
It's just too cold.
ground temperatures that are too cold, exactly. And so people need to be aware of what's required before they're staring down the barrel of a gun, so to speak, in regards to the welfare of feeding their animals. And so it's very important to understand what their animals are going to require through the winter period, and what's standing on the paddock and what they're going to need to have up their sleeve to carry them through. And on top of that, it's a little bit more complicated. So carrying animals through the winter, particularly when we're talking about the typical food species that we see on lifestyle properties, involves an understanding of what's required to maintain a pregnancy, being that most of these species are pregnant through the winter months. And it doesn't take too much foresight to understand that the nutrients that are required to maintain an animal, we're going to need more of that energy, more of those nutrients to grow a baby inside the mother. And physiologically, that mother is going to divert all of those nutrients to its baby in preference to itself. And this is why we can get ourselves in terrible amounts of trouble without knowing it through winter periods. It's not until the very latter stages where things are a disaster that we're going to see animals showing signs of that, unless they're really well monitored. And on top of that, I think good planning of what nutrients and nutrition are required obviously is the hallmark of preventing it being a problem in the first place.
You look at a big operation and the grass grows and you make hay. A small block, you can't do that.
Exactly. The economics of small block holding farming is, even for a really well seasoned farmer, is a very difficult undertaking to plan feed through, because as you say, when we have larger scales of land in use, it's much easier to divert areas of land aside to store feed, as you say, whether it be hay, whether it be making silage, and just the sheer economies of scale mean that there may be more available in the system to invest in supplemental feeding. And of course this isn't the case in lifestyle farmers. It's people wanting to play farmers. I don't mean to be disrespectful of that, I'm one of them myself. And it's fun, it's nice, you've got the best of both worlds living in a rural environment, but with that comes the responsibilities that you have on looking after those animals. And sometimes that means paring the numbers or the stock units on that 10 acres back to a bare minimum that you know you're going to safely be able to carry. And unfortunately now, or even prior to now, is the time to have been thinking about that and doing it.
So okay, supplementary feed, it's expensive, but it probably isn't all that nutritional in many cases.
Exactly. So one supplement is not the same as the other, if you like. So for instance, if you can imagine hay, reasonable maintenance feed, and we might be able to maintain dry stock with unpregnant stock that go into the winter in a reasonable order. We might be able to maintain animals like that through a winter period by supplementing with hay, but I think it's a very far call to think that we're going to grow unborn animals on hay. So I think if you're looking at any sort of breeding operation or growing out any reasonable meat animal on hay, things are just going to come to a roaring great standstill at the very best through the winter period if you're supplementing with hay. So then you're looking at much more expensive supplements to actually obtain reasonable amounts of growth in unborn animals or in meat potential. And so, you know, this involves investing in silage, haylage, these kind of much higher nutritional feeds that have
sheep nuts.
Exactly. Well, dare we say it, because of course they are uneconomical. But if it's a lifestyle that you're after and you're on a small acreage and you want to get involved in that sort of thing, with breeding, then perhaps that is the loss earner, the cost that comes with obtaining that lifestyle, is investing that sort of additional money in that high concentrate sort of feeding. And I'm not saying that it's as simple as throwing casting nuts around the place either, because with it comes risks involved, and you need to transition animals onto high concentrate feeds to avoid other health problems. So when you're doing that, it needs to be under good advice as well.
And I guess there is a tendency for small block holders to say, the cabbage leaves, outside leaves of the cauliflower, flick those over the fence, they'll be good.
Yeah, and although in certain circumstances that can be a valuable addition to nutrition, it's such a variable issue, and it comes itself with inherent risks of bloat and things like that. So it is a very difficult scenario to just try and plug up holes as they're occurring. I guess the other very pertinent issue to talk about, and we touched on it before, is monitoring, and particularly when we're talking about sheep. It's exceptionally important that through the winter period, when we're getting into this feed crunch, that condition of the animals is looked at. And so that means, unfortunately, with fleeced animals such as sheep, you just don't get a good visual idea on condition score. You must put your hand on them to actually work out whether they're losing too much body condition. And that means at least 2 or 3 times through the winter, yarding them and actually getting in a position to actually feel what sort of condition they're in. It's very important, and it's the biggest...
It's the only way you can do it.
Exactly, and it's the most important welfare monitoring system with sheep in particular that's there through the winter. You can't just cast a blind eye, because, as I've said, it's not until that very latter stages of problems that you'll start seeing health issues. It needs to be kept up to date and intervened well before we're starting to see problems. And seeing animals fall over with pregnancy toxemia, it's just a wasted animal. It's exceptionally rare and very difficult to get them back on their feet. So we need this rising plane of nutrition through the pregnancy, and people need to be prepared to be able to give that if they're breeding animals.
Cattle, of course, will bellow to let you know, but sheep won't necessarily do it.
Not necessarily, and I think it's one of those, they're an animal that are very easily left by the wayside, unfortunately, especially people on lifestyle block farms. They've got a job, it's winter months, they're coming home in the dark, they're leaving in the dark to go to work. It's very easy just to not notice, and you have to be conscious and make an input. And as I've said, just take stock of your responsibilities as an animal owner. That one of your responsibilities is to maintain the health of those stock, even if it's on a small acreage.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Now, New Zealanders are known for their ability to be able to be amazing stock people. We're going to meet one in a moment or two who's making a brand new breed out of a very well established breed.